In today's video, we'll showcase the UK premiere screening of the movie, Beatles 64. Make sure to watch the video till the end as we bring you exclusive interviews with the crew of the movie on the red carpet.
It's very exciting. I mean, Curzon is a beautiful theater. We just did a tech check. The sound is fantastic, and you know, it's a music film. It's got rock and roll, so I'm looking forward to it. These four young kids from Liverpool, really. George was 20, Ringo was 23. They loved American music. All of their musical heroes were American. So this is a story they had dreamed of going to America. Here we see them not only going to America, but they have a #1 hit. Why is it relevant today? Because it's a great story. It's a story of optimism and joy. And in 1964, it happened to, you know, in a time of great sorrow. It was right after the Kennedy assassination. I don't know that we have anything on that level, but I think it's always good to have something that, you know, makes you feel good, and brings you up, gives you joy, inspires you.
There were two scenes that, when we first looked at the Maysles footage from 1964, that just blew my mind. And one of them is when the band is playing with the equipment, the sound equipment, the Nagra, that the Maysles brothers had kind of customized for their work, and just the unabashed joy and fun and surprise. And you know, each of the Beatles themselves were so interested in the visual arts and in film specifically. They would go off and all become involved in films in their different ways. And so I thought that gave me such joy just watching that. And even now, after we've seen the film so many times, I'm just still just charmed by their reactions to this technology. And then similarly, when they're at the plaza and they're kind of just starting to get, you know, used to being recorded, and they have a microphone, and John says, well, what exactly are you trying to record? And they're all just, you see the camaraderie, the humor, the way they play off of each other. And then it ends with Paul saying, you know, get down on the microphone, get the microphone in the shot, defy convention. And I thought defy convention is such a wonderful, you know, kind of just mission statement, you know, for the whole episode.
I mean, I think the crazy thing, you look at this footage, it's filmed in 1964, but it feels like it's the 1950s or the 1940s. I don't know that we tried to balance it. The music is more important than anything else. That is their great legacy. But you see in 1964 the seeds of all the changes that were about to happen. So it's almost like they're hinted at. You know, we have a little bit of archival here and there of people talking about different kinds of change. But it really wasn't a question of, really it's a love story between the fans and the four Beatles.
I actually remember the first album that I listened to, because those were the days when you would actually consume, you know, a whole record. And, you know, I probably heard songs, but I wasn't quite focused or conscious of it until I saw the White Album. My brother had a copy of the White Album, and I was intrigued and captivated by every single thing about it, the look of it, the two records, and each of the records having all these different songs that were connected to each other but so unique and different, and that each one was a world unto itself. So my entry into the Beatles was the White Album, and then it was so fun to go hear everything they had recorded up to that point and everything they recorded after that. It's like choosing your favorite child. I can't know. I mean, I have so many. It would just be, you know, maybe you could do top 25 or something, but they're all so, you know, they're all so great, and you kind of, there's not a day that goes by where you wouldn't want to hear any one of their songs, you know.
story is not as interesting as I love that you discovered the White album. My sister had the Red and the Blue album, and I behind her back I would go and I'd sneak and I'd put it on the turntable and I would listen to it over and over and over again. And then it took me until I was a teenager. I was a little kid. When I was a teenager, I went back and I listened to all the original albums, but kind of backwards. Starting with Abbey Road, and then going to Let It Be, and then working my way back.
That's so funny. I think I did that too. I think I went to the end and went early, and then the earlier albums were like more discoveries. It was almost kind of like, it felt like the later work was more approachable, coming at it from a kid in the late 70s, just going backwards,
It's twofold. All the behind-the-scenes stuff. You see the Beatles, in the car, on the street, in their hotel room, between gigs, and you're really seeing them interact in an intimate way. It's very interesting. But, of course, more than anything else, the musical performance, the restorations of the musical performance make it new again. So say the Washington Coliseum, which is footage that has been seen before, it's been restored, the picture's been restored by Park Road in New Zealand, but the sound has also been demixed and remixed by Giles Martin. And it's a revelation. And I think any fan, anyone who likes rock and roll, anyone who likes music, let alone the Beatles, it's very exciting.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's the Maysles footage restored, both picture and audio, and it's also kind of seeing those events within the context of history and hearing about the continued resonance of that time in people's lives. I mean, all the beautiful stories about how this music transformed their lives, and just bringing that home and kind of, just creating that moment and creating context around that moment.
Well, it's an amazing privilege to be here. It's funny, I've worked on Beatles material now for a long time, and I could never do the job my dad did, but it's great to be a part of the legacy that kind of lives on and on. And I have daughters who are 15 and 17, and they watch me work on this film. They go, "Oh my God!" Actually, they quite fancied the Beatles. Watching them, it was interesting. So it's just music lives on. Actually, fun of its quality. A lot of these concerts in this film were recorded on like a very mono thin tape, and never really to be played back. And now here we are, over 50 years on, 6 years on, and I'm having to try and do a lot of work to try and get it so it's in a cinema format, so it compares what we're listening to today. And so the band themselves are like, the band are smashing their instruments. They're a proper rock band, and you need to get that across the audience. I wish I'd been there. I think that's the thing. And then I think people watching the films will wish they'd been there. And my job and the team's job is to make you feel like you're there. And it takes a lot of work to do that. And I think that you forget how young they are. One Direction were older than the Beatles when they were, it's that thing. It's like, and so if you can get that vitality, that energy, and that feeling of you can understand then why it's so important, why the culture's so important. But it's just fun to see a really good band at the top of their game. I always think, listen, Beatles fans will always like Beatles stuff. I'm always interested in what people who haven't seen the Beatles, haven't heard the Beatles, will take from it. And I just hope they realise that they were unusually good. They were the first stadium band, and this film from 1964 was before that. It was them finding out, it was them discovering, and audiences discovering them, and there's an interesting interplay where they look surprised, because no one had really, Elvis before them, but Elvis wasn't a band. They were the first band to have been through this, ever. No band had done this. And you can see the surprise, and I think that's the thing. I think that's, how many bands are around now? There's hardly any, and it's like, maybe there should be more, and hopefully kids can watch this and go, we should form a band.
We're thrilled. We did a US premiere, which was fantastic, and it's so nice to do it back in the old country. Well, we had a jumble of hundreds and hundreds of cans of footage that was shot back in '64, and we sent it all down to our friend Peter Jackson in New Zealand, who we'd become friends with because of Get Back, and he loves giant jigsaw puzzles, so he had his technicians reassemble it, restore it in Rush's order with sound, and that was presented to our friend Martin Scorsese and David Tedeschi and Margaret Bodie for them to make the bedrock of their film. So the bedrock of the film, it's not all, there's other material in the film other than the Maysles footage, but that is, we wouldn't be talking about it without the Maysles footage. It was great that Al and David shot all this vox pop material that was going all around the plaza. And he didn't use much of it in his original films. He did several versions of it back in the 60s and then 70s and 80s. But he stayed away from all this American people, adults and kids, all reacting to how they felt about the Beatles. And that is just magical, I think. So this film is as much about, you see America through the eyes of the Beatles, that eye-popping moment. We've all been to America, and you go to New York, you go, oh my God, this is amazing. Well, imagine that with being all this adulation on top. But then the other part of the film is how America reacted to them. So that's I think the new part of this film, is it tells the whole story from two perspectives. It's hard to pick one. I think the quality of the sound in particular and picture of the Washington concert, which was filmed back in '64, but the actual sound recording wasn't great quality because that was the time. But through a process of demixing and then remixing, which was done by Giles Martin, who does practically all of the Beatles' work, it suddenly gave it a power that you've never heard before. So you really feel what it was like to be in a concert in 1964 and hear the Beatles live. They can expect a condensed film about a snapshot of 14 days when they were in the States. And there's something very, you really get in the moment with what it must have been like to be there, for them and for the fans, and I think that is special. Well, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the footage, so for me personally, I can't. Maybe you better ask some people afterwards they'll probably have favourite moments. Yes, I heard Love Me Do, which was their first single. I think I was at school at the time, and I did a sort of double take, or like, that sounds good. So I remember that moment and then became a fan ever since. We're all fans, even if we do work for them.
I'm stunned at how excited they were to arrive in the United States after they'd been in England already with the #1 record, already in Hamburg and rough and tough, and then they went over there and acted like giddy boys. It was very exciting. I love seeing it, and I'm really. I think there's probably not a lot of people have seen this footage. Well, I know no one's seen 17 minutes of it. The obvious one is it's the anniversary, but it was before they were really this phenomenon, and I think celebrating it 50, 60 years later is just, I think it's a good moment in time. It's joyful. Someone wrote the other day, whatever happened to the wisdom of the joy of the Beatles? And, I think they brought a lot of joy and abandon at a time in America that was really heavy time. Civil rights, President Kennedy. I was there, I was in high school, and it was terrifying to see what was going on in the country. Then this whole shift happened, and it was really about the music and the power of that music, and they happened to be the chosen ones to bring that, powerful, not even a message, just abandon. First of all, as you know, Peter Jackson has been doing the restoration for us, and he's just he really is incredible. He's the one that that will notice something and work on it and bring it into the foreground. Maybe a glance across the stage, maybe the way they look at each other. I mean, I noticed in the Washington D.C. concert that was it was such a bad copy, you couldn't even tell what was going on. You certainly couldn't hear what was going on. What he's done with that is phenomenal. And I think that's what you notice, the nuances, that there's this craziness going on stage. They're rocking like crazy, and yet they still have time as if they're in slow motion. And that's the thing, the way they look at each other, the way they walk towards each other, the way John goes over and plugs in the amp, you think how it's slow motion for you because everything around it is just so frenetic. Well, I think really the power of music, as you all know, but this was a shift in time from roots of American music, and as Smokey Robinson says, black music, that so inspired them. I think that is what launched them into their own, to create their own type of music, because they're unique. And their music was unique. Nobody had ever heard anything like that before. And, it was they were inspired by American music, which ultimately, if you look back at Southern music, that's sort of Celtic music. So, Irish, Scottish music, all of that is one big melange of creativity, of music, and they just picked up on that. And out of that, they created their own body of work. It's totally unique. I was actually around when they arrived in the United States of America, and it was bewildering to me. I saw them, I think their second visit there, at the Hollywood Bowl and at Dodger Stadium, and it was unhinged, joy, but it was a little bit scary, and I loved actually seeing the people who were interviewed who were there. I think they're just in hindsight, looking back on what they felt. And really, it was just liberating. It was a liberating moment. Somehow the Beatles gave everyone permission to feel something, gave them permission to express abandon, gave them permission to be joyful and just let go of that darkness. That was happening. I mean, you're talking just post-war. In England, it's still, there was rationing until 1953. And then coming to America after the events that happened in 63, I think it was. So they really gave people permission to let that go. Yeah, it was a very amazing cultural shift that never went back. It was a real right turn, left turn, whatever you want to call it. It was a real shift in direction.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and comment on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to be notified when new videos are released.